Yo, I love making PS1 style characters inside of Blender. And today I'm going to be making Vega from Street Fighter 4. And along the way, I'm going to give you some cool little tips and tricks to help you make better PS1 characters inside of Blender. So let's hop in right now. Okay, so the first thing I do on this project, and basically I don't really do this on many, I'll just start out with a base mesh, basically just because I wanted to make a character as quick as possible, not really spend much time on making a base mesh that I'd already done. I have many videos on doing base meshes if you want to go find those. Basically what I did first was start to clean up the topology a little bit. I wasn't the biggest fan of basically how it kind of interacted with the legs and stuff like that. So I basically just sat there playing around with the topology, cleaning it up a little bit so that deformation would be a little better. It's basically not that necessary, especially for PS1 characters, where we actually supposed to be lowering the poly count. And I didn't really do it here, basically just because I was going for more of just the aesthetic in the textures, not as much when it came to playing the specific actual model. More just because I wanted to actually just push the shapes and stuff a little bit and kind of get a good looking model and then texture it on top, focusing more on the silhouette and stuff like that compared to the actual shape of everything. Okay, then off the bat, I basically just start working on the character. You can see here, I basically just started working on the belt and I just duplicated part of it and then just use some edge loops to kind of scale in and out because basically it's going to sit on top of the character. So I can just kind of do that. That's basically what we do with a lot of the stuff. Then I was kind of just creating a little shape that I was going to use to create the kind of like loop, whatever, when it came to the little tar. Sometimes I would kind of use a cube to subdivide it, but I basically just went and added a cube and again subdivide it by extrude it out into like a loop. And then these little tars are basically just planes I extruded out. And my references weren't very clear on which side was which, so I had to actually flip it and then just recalculate the normals, because when you flip, you can scale on the x-axis by -1, or you can use Control M and X. You have to kind of just change normals. Then I went to adding these kind of like little metal cuff things. You can just do this with edge loops, extruding out, so you can select the whole thing, extrude out, just bevel to get like a consistent width, and then just extrude it back in. And you can do edge slide if you want to kind of like get a little bit of a taper on some of these. And then I was just spent a bit of time trying to get a more consistent width between, well, that gap on the edges and stuff like that. Then also spent some time lining up the base mesh with stuff like the little belt, basically just adding in edges, snapping them to the pieces using the vertex snapping. Love vertex snapping, by the way. And then what I can do is I can merge them together and then they won't have any sort of problems with clipping or anything like that, because when you have two meshes that are very similar on top of each other and start rigging and animating, it's going to become a nightmare. Over here I also went and duplicated part of the face to make the mask. I basically kind of just took the whole thing, insetted, and then just grabbed that insetted edge and just used probably like Alt S or just scaled it up to get it out. I think I spent a lot of time on the hair trying to get something that actually looked good, and I really struggled. But basically I started out with like a plane, just extruded it down, and then just had a bunch of reference on a PureF board. Again, PureF board is amazing. You just go kind of chuck a bunch of images in. You need to have references, especially when you're modeling a character that already exists. But yeah, so yeah, I was just trying to spend a lot of time just trying to get all of the hair working. I think this is something that a lot of people don't really realize is your character is going to look awful when you're making them, and it's going to look awful for a while. You kind of just have to spend a lot of time adding in all the details and just tweaking them until you get something that looks right, and just try to keep it semi like consistent, especially like the poly count, kind of the size of the faces and stuff like that. And if you have reference, just do your best to get the reference like close as possible, and then see if you can push parts of your reference, because that's a lot of what modeling comes down to, is being able to push your reference to get it looking how you want it to. And that's especially like with all this PS1 stuff, they didn't have many polys to actually work with, so they had to rely on pushing the shapes and using like pre-established kind of conceptions in your mind to get the thing across. They're not going to show you every single detail. They're going to also, some stuff is going to be in the mesh, but they also just have to simplify it and just kind of get the kind of symbolism of it, not so much the actual shape of it. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going for with this hair, and didn't turn out too well. I think just in general, long piece of hair didn't really work that well. I basically just extruded it all the way out. So I was going to keep it just straight, because when I go and rig it, then I'm able to kind of animate it however much I want and all of that. So I basically just extruded it out a bunch. Actually, I curved it a little bit, but not that much. But as I said, so I basically just have it like that. So I can use it with however I want with the actual rig and animate the hair. Then I'm getting set up for actually texturing the character. Cool, this is when we actually have some fun. So basically I had to go UV unwrap the character and also get like everything merged together. So similar thing to before where I said with the belt, I have to do that with the head and like the mask and all of that. Get everything merged together, and then UV unwrapping. If you don't know what UV unwrapping is, basically you have to take your whole mesh and add a bunch of cuts into it to be able to let it lay flat. And then whatever, kind of like you'll see basically in this view, the left side is the flat version of the mesh and the right side is the actual mesh. So that will kind of be a thing. And then to get this kind of preset image like you see on the screen, At the top of your image editor, just click new, and then just you change the generator type, and then just add that into your materials. When you go to material preview, you'll be able to see it. Yeah, so basically in this stage, I'm just making a bunch of like cleanups. Like here, you can see on the calf, I'm basically getting it so that has like a better gap, and not because in the beginning I just extruded it out from a face, which isn't the greatest. And yeah, I have some tutorials on UV unwrapping if you want to look into that and see the specific tips. But basically here, you set the little viewport overlay to display stretching, which helps a lot when you are working on your characters. Basically, what this does is like it'll kind of give you a heat map of what is stretching, and that helps you a lot when knowing when to actually place your seams. Yeah, I'll have that linked in a place down below. Or if you want, you can go grab my PS1 character course, which will be linked down below, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, cool. So we're nearly getting to the end of the whole UV unwrapping cloud. Basically, you have to repeat it for every single mesh in your whole thing. And then once you are done that, once you've done that, then you can actually choose how to lay it all out and stuff like that. So you can kind of make the most of your texture space. Okay, and also went and added in the eyes, which is basically, I took the kind of mask thing and then just used the knife tool to kind of cut a simple shape and then just extruded it in. And then obviously just went and cleaned up the UVs for that section as well. Yep, cool. Then I was just actually added in a new texture at a lower resolution, because we're not going to be using a like 1024 or whatever when we're doing this character, or 4K or whatever. We are going to be using something low like 256 by 256, 128 by 128, and depending on if you split it up, you could even do 64 by 64 and like do 2 parts of your characters or something like that. But yeah, so when it comes to the actual texture painting part, the first thing that I end up doing is kind of blocking in my colors. And how I do that is by going and selecting parts in edit mode and then using the like selective tool inside of the texture paint. So that's just really useful because you can basically select parts and then just kind of chuck down colors. You can also use the paint bucket tool to actually drop a bunch of color in. And then that's just a really quick way of laying down the base colors. So once you've done that, then you can also see like when I start painting, if you have any issues, because especially at a lower like resolution with your textures, it's quite common that you'll have little like problems where the seams don't like line up. So when you're painting, that there will be like pixels lining over. So sometimes you kind of have to just tweak the margin of, or like the gap between all the UV stuff, and see if it's going to be a problem and stuff like that. Yep, and then just kind of start laying down all the colors. Just basically start doing that. And while you're laying down these colors, make sure to use the color palettes feature inside Blender. It's really useful, and especially when you come to later, I'll kind of explain more of what my method for actually painting stuff is. But save your colors, because as soon as you start painting on top of them, it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually find that specific value, and then that just makes your life a lot easier. And you also don't want to just picking random values every single time, because that's just going to end up with like bad colors and stuff. So you want to have a more consistent color palette with what you're working with. You'll see it basically just sits there just underneath the color picker. Color palette, you just click new and then just add in new colors. You can like rearrange them and stuff, and then also remove them and stuff like that. So yeah, but basically however they work is when you choose a color and add it in, it will set it to the color palette. Yeah, and then what I started doing once I get all the colors boxed in, for this character specifically, because like his upper body is quite a big part of it, I just picked a darker color and then just started outlining kind of all the muscles, just using some like anatomy and knowledge, just kind of chucking down all the different lines, all the different stuff. Obviously, you can go look at the reference of the actual Vega character, or you can just go find kind of a reference online to see the anatomy of a upper body, and then that'll kind of help you in terms of knowing where to place all the different lines and the shades and all of that stuff. Okay, yeah, so that's kind of the thing I start with. And then what I kind of do when I am painting my characters is I will pick 3 colors. So obviously as you go along, you'll pick your 3 colors, or your one color for it, which will be your base color. And then what I go do is I go pick a shadow and a highlight color. So especially when doing stuff like this. So shadow, you'll kind of obviously use that to outline the shadows and the dark areas. Remember that when you're doing stuff like this, you also have to kind of bake in a little bit of lighting. So stuff that's not going to see the light as much is going to be kind of in darkness. So you have to paint those stuff because there's no shading on the stuff. So kind of do that when you are doing it. But yeah, get your shadows in, and then you can use the highlight to highlight different areas, and kind of give it a more of a 3D volume. Because remember, we can't add any details with the mesh, so we have to add the details with the textures. Yeah, so that's kind of my process behind all of it, and that's kind of what I do for most of my texturing. Cool. Another tip that I can also give you for when you're painting PS1 characters, like specifically, is you can also do this with filters, but it's called like dithering and stuff. But basically, the colors aren't going to be super like high fidelity. They're not going to kind of blend between each other perfectly, and they're not going to have like a consistent like colors. You'll see a lot that sometimes they'll have like kind of random colors pop up and stuff like that, or whatever. You kind of know what I'm talking about. So basically what I kind of like doing sometimes is taking a brush, kind of picking a completely random color. So do the upper body and pick like a blue or something, or even just whatever color I'm using, maybe a shadow color, and then just make my brush really small and then kind of just like sprinkle it on top. And that will kind of just add a little bit of extra kind of stuff into there. As I said, you can also use like dithering and stuff like that. I think you might be able to do it inside of free stuff like GIMP. I'm pretty sure there's that have filters for it. But yeah, look into that, and I think there is actually a Blender compositing setup that I can do for it. Haven't really looked into it. I was kind of happy with my result. And there is also another way of doing it, which is basically when you're painting, add in a brush or like a texture to your brush using a noise texture. So you can go just there, add a new one, set the settings, and then use a noise texture, and then just mess around with the color ramp, and then use the color ramp to go and set kind of the amount. You want to use the color ramp, so I think you have to just like scroll down to check out the settings, change it there, and then that will allow it to kind of affect your colors slightly, make it like a very light gray and a white, so it doesn't affect it that much, and you can kind of play around with the values, how much it covers and all of that, to get it kind of how you would like. And then you can take it off as you want if you need to like lay down a clean color, because it will affect your colors slightly. But yeah, so again, as I said, so like with the whole character, I'm going in, kind of laying in extra details, all the shadow bits, and then going in with the highlight to kind of bring it. As I said, it's also, you kind of try to make your character look 3D. So the shadows will obviously be at the edges of a shape. So whatever, like a circle, the shadows are going to be at the edge, and then the highlight's going to be like in the middle, whatever. And then you also have something called like ambient occlusion, which is basically just when there's two edges or like a crevice or corners next to each other, there's going to be a little bit of a shadow there, so you can go paint that in yourself when doing that. And also, when I'm doing this character, especially the upper body, I was kind of working with all the symmetrical stuff, so with the X mirror on. But then when it came to doing, especially like cloth wrinkles, that's when I turned off the X mirror, because obviously your clothing is not going to fall the exact same way on both sides of your body. It's going to look slightly different. It's going to be asymmetrical. The stuff like the muscles aren't going to be asymmetrical. Those are going to be symmetrical. But the clothing folds and stuff like that is. So turn off the X mirror when you're working on the clothing, and then turn your X mirror back on when you're working with the muscles of your character. Yeah. Now, when you're also picking with your colors, remember that there's like a little bit of color theory going into it. Usually what happens is, like with your base color, you don't want to just darken it up and brighten it up for your color that you pick. You want to kind of change the actual hue, which is also just moving it around on the color wheel. Like if you think of the Photoshop color picker, or actually I don't know, but basically when it has like the outside rim, but you can change the hue. You can also see it if you click on the color and change to the HSV. Just change the hue slightly when you change the brightness. So maybe the darker parts vary more towards a blue, and the highlights vary towards like a red. If you change the hue of the stuff, it will kind of create more depth in your characters or in your colors that you pretty much need. Okay. Also, another tip you can also use, especially when working on PS1 stuff, is using an image texture. You can use an image. So usually I'll kind of grab like a black and white, hopefully. And then if it's black and white, you can kind of overlay your own color on top. And then what you can do is, so like in this case, I was using 4 folds of materials. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it works atrociously. And if it does have color, if you just leave the color picker blank white, then it'll overlay whatever color your image has. But if your image is white, then you can use whatever color you want to paint and use the details. So that's a very easy way of adding in details if you need to add a face and you are really bad at drawing faces, because faces are really hard. It doesn't matter too much with this character, but faces are really hard to draw inside a Blender or just paint by hand. So you can go just grab a picture of a face. You can use your own face if you want, even if that's just a base, and then you kind of like go in and clean it up. Using a face or just images can be really useful. You just add an image texture, and as I said, so if your image has color and you want to use that color, change your color picker back to white. But if your image is just blank, like a monochrome black and white image, then you can be able to choose whatever color you want. And then before importing it, basically just kind of mess around with the colors and bring it, like just use like a curves image adjustment in like Photoshop or something, and just bring it up. Yep. Now, if you're enjoying this and you'll make your own PS1 characters, then go click the first link down in the description. There has a full PS1 guide that'll walk you through almost everything that I cover inside this video, more in depth, and to create this exact character inside of Blender. So you don't have to waste a bunch of time and you get some cool characters by the end of it. And as I said, so I was kind of also adding that like dithering kind of thing, where basically just making my brush really small and just kind of sprinkle all over, just to kind of break up the shapes a little bit, make it less hand painted look and more that PS1 style look. What I could have done when it came to doing all of the tattoos when painting it, like I didn't really need to. What I could have done was also done it on a different layer if I was worried I was going to mess up, because like what I did for it was basically I just painted directly on top. So if I made any mistakes or wanted to clean it up, I'd basically just have to repaint stuff. So that was like very nice. But I could have painted a different layer. It's up to you. You can basically just go mix them together. But obviously, if you're going to be taking it to a game engine, that's going to be more difficult. But obviously, you can merge together when you send it to the game engine. But yeah, I was basically just being lazy. But probably a better way to do it is painting in your tattoos and stuff and overlaying it on top. But yeah, and then I forgot to kind of actually model the little spark for his hand. So basically all of that was I just took part of the hand, duplicated it, extruded it up, and then had like an actual piece for the hand. And then just took a couple like squares that I used for the blades, and then just extruded them out, and then kind of mess around with the proportions a bit because it's a bit of a weird shape, so you have to kind of get it correct. And then working in the local axis so I could get the all of the blades kind of still straight when I'm curving them around. Because if you just rotate it like normally, if you go front view and rotate, that's going to mess up your like the straightness of your blade. So make sure you're working in the local when you are rotating, so you can rotate around the local X. So if you're going to rotate your blades around, do it in object mode, not global, or like in edit mode, because that's going to mess around with the rotation and stuff. And then the only thing with doing it now is that if you didn't have any gaps on your UVs, then you'll be screwed and have to get a whole new image just for these like little extra details. Because obviously you painted everything, so other than like moving everything around it like a photo editor like Photoshop or something, then you just wouldn't be able to kind of paint these extra bits in without a different image, or as I said, moving the actual pieces of the UVs. But luckily I had some spaces. I think it's when you basically have a more simple character or like simple UV layout like this, you don't really have to worry too much about getting all of the like this won't be that. There'll be more spaces because like the shapes aren't going to like line up perfectly. Yeah. The next thing I went to go do was rig my character. Now, what I could do is use the Rigify kind of base character to set it all up and all of that stuff. I decided not to do that. I'm not sure why. Like basically the Rigify, some people complain when I said use it. Like literally you just need to know how kind of a character is going to work. You're going to have a bone for like the upper arm, one bone for the lower arm, might have one for the shoulder. You're going to have one for parts of your like spine. You're gonna have to have bones for your spine, and then one for the fingers and one for the head and one for the hair. Basically you're gonna kind of just do all of that. And now the fact is, if you do it by hand or just start from scratch, then you have to name every single bone, and it takes some time and it's pretty annoying. But you basically have to go through and like name shoulder.l, arm upper arm.l, lower arm.l, finger.l, hand. Like it takes a lot of time, a bit annoying. So that's why you usually use Rigify. I probably just went because I was like, I might as well just do it by hand and show people. But yeah, you'll see tutorials out on my channel. Sometimes I use Rigify, sometimes I start from scratch, depends on how people complain because I use Rigify. But yeah, and then I went to set up a arcade rig, which is basically you kind of set up a rig that allows you to move the hips around a lot easier while keeping the feet on the floor, whereas usually if you want to kind of reposition the hips or just move them at all, then you have to update the feet. I have more explanations on this, but basically, arcade just makes your animating experience a lot easier. And I did a similar thing for the hair, just so I was able to control it a little bit more. And then added a pole toggle, which basically just kind of points it which way I need. So I can grab that other piece, and that depends which, like, it decides which way the hair is going to kind of curve when I pull it in. Because it's like, it has to decide which way it's going to go. And if you don't have a pole target and your bones are straight, then it's going to be like a 50-50 depending on which way it actually curves. But if you add a pole target, then you can actually control it. I also went to added some bones for the kind of like little drooping, I don't know, things for his belt. And also similar for his hair. I'm not sure exactly why I added those, but if I wanted to animate his bangs, I could. And that is the thing that matters. Now, once you have rigged your character, the next thing you have to do is go and weight paint it, which is a nightmare. The automatic weight paints work sometimes, and it'll be sometimes where it messes up a little bit, like all of the little things coming off his belt, those all affected the calf. So I had to go remove all of those from my weight paints. You can just go change them in edit mode. So you can go like select parts of it and then just go like edit mode, and then just select them and just click remove from the weight paint, which is the vertex groups tab. If you didn't know, your weight paints are just vertex groups and they get controlled by those, and then you can also use and see them in weight paint. So if you're ever using vertex groups or using weight paint groups, whatever, they're all the same thing, and you can see a vertex paint group can be edited in edit mode, can be edited in weight paint, and all of that. So you can select parts and just add them in if you need, which is pretty useful when you're doing it. You can also go and like set your mirror, so when you're painting, you can have it mirrored across, which obviously saves a lot of time, so you don't have to update it on both sides. When I am doing my weight paints, what I like doing is basically going and getting my character into a pose I'm going to need to do it in. So most of the time, especially like the legs, you don't really pull your leg back as much, or like your thigh doesn't really go far back. So like obviously you're animating in 3D space, so you can do whatever the hell you want with your rig, but basically you're going to just pose it however you need, and then just start cleaning up the rig to make sure that parts that aren't supposed to be moving aren't moving, and the parts that are supposed to be moving are moving. Just like where it gets difficult is where you have like the arm, like the elbow joint and the knee joint. That's a little bit more difficult, and I think I might have covered it in a video. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, you can go see that. It's basically just going to be a lot of experimenting to see what kind of helps clean it up or not, and stuff like that. So just see, like, if you move it, does it keep your shape? Does it not keep your shape? And all of that stuff. That's kind of the biggest thing. And just, yeah, that's kind of the overall weight painting thing. Obviously, it's PS1, so some people aren't going to care that much. But yeah, the main thing was, like, I needed to pose it for the YouTube thumbnail. So that's why I went and rigged the whole character. So basically, I went and did like an hour work just so I could add a single picture to the thumbnail. But yeah, obviously it just looks cooler when you pose it compared to the default thing. Getting the pose is actually quite difficult for some reason. I spent a while trying to get it. It's not even that difficult to pose. I think, I don't know, maybe something's wrong with me that day. So I spent the time getting some of the pose right. I don't think I'm going to get it that right. It could also just be the proportion of my character. I don't think I made his muscles like big enough almost. Because the Street Fighter characters are very stylized, and I didn't really get it that close. So I don't know if that's my fault or not. I should have spent more time trying to get close to the reference, but I didn't. But yeah, right, and there we go. We have the final result. Let me know what you think. And yeah, cool. I hope you've enjoyed this whole video. And if you have, then you might want to learn some more things about PS1 characters. Luckily for you, I have a couple more videos linked right there. Click on there, and I'll see you there. Cheers. Bye-bye.